Today's guest is Jeff Williams, who helps boomers escape the corporate world and create a business they love based on their expert skills and desires. Welcome to Richer Soul, Life Beyond Money, the last baby step. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, full of energy, excited about the day? What's it like to have great relationships and friends who support you? How does it feel to have an excess of money to be able to make the choices you want? Imagine being connected to the universe and having it provide everything you desire. Your past does not dictate your future, and the only thing holding you back from this vision is you. If you haven't listened to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create balance in your life. I help people live the life of their dreams, and you can see how on richersoul.com by looking under the coaching call tabs to hear actual coaching sessions. You can also find all the show notes for this episode while you're there. I send out a monthly email where I share some of the best articles of the month, and I let you know about upcoming episodes. And I also try to share a little wisdom that I learned during the month. You can sign up while you're there. I also share the most interesting articles I read every week on Facebook at facebook.com/Richer Soul. It's harder to keep wealth than it is to make it. Once you come up with a system to create wealth, you need a system to keep it. If you'd like a second opinion on your financial plans, or you're worried you're missing on something, check out the SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats at richersoul.com/SWOT. Before we meet Jeff, I've been hearing a lot of conversations around the future of jobs and college education. Corporate jobs are disappearing, and half of jobs that will exist in 10 years have not been invented yet. Colleges are getting behind the curve with regards to technology and future job needs. This is why preparing yourself and gaining wisdom and experience are going to be more important going forward. Today, we're going to meet Jeff Williams. He is the CEO and chief coach of BizStarters.com, a Chicago-based business startup coaching company that has specialized in guiding clients over 50 since 1993. Jeff publishes the popular Business Startup for Boomers podcast series and is frequently quoted on the topic of boomer entrepreneurship on business websites such as Forbes, Entrepreneur, and nextavenue.org. I'm excited to talk to Jeff today about how people can escape jobs they don't love and create their own work that they do love. Let's meet Jeff. Welcome to Richer Soul, Jeff. It's great to have you join us today.
Thanks, Rocky.
Always a pleasure. So let's start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Quite a bit, as it turns out. I understood from a pretty early age that I was going to have to do certain things in life in exchange for some monetary comfort. From the time I was maybe 4 or 5 years old until I was 16 or 17, I only got $1 a week allowance. And the understanding was that if I wanted something special, such as a baseball glove, I'd go to the store with my dad, and we'd figure out how much it cost, and he'd say, okay, how soon do you want it? I'd say, well, I'd sure like to have it, in a month and a half or whatever. And he'd say, okay, well, based on your allowance, you'll have $6. And the glove costs $12. Where are you going to come up with the other $6? So this was pretty obvious to me from a very early age that money does lead to certain things in life that are happy. I have read stories of people who are fabulously wealthy today who say that their families never talked about money or money was a negative topic. That wasn't true in my household. Even though my dad was a government bureaucrat, he was very entrepreneurial in his leisure time. And he said, there's a lot of opportunities out there to exchange your talent and your labor for money, and then you can do some good things with it.
That's pretty amazing. You were lucky to have that kind of an upbringing because most people don't. I'm just surprised about your answer, though, because most kids ask, when do you want the baseball glove, would say now, not 6 weeks.
Well, I'm sure that the first couple of times I had this conversation, my answer probably was, can I get it tomorrow? I think that's when the object lesson was applied. Matter of fact, I'll just tell you, I have a quick little story here because this really relates to me being an adult entrepreneur. When I was 8 or 9, I started mowing lawns in Ohio where I grew up. I grew up around Columbus, Ohio, and that was very typical. Virtually every boy in the block had some lawns that we were mowing, just a little pocket change, just to, buy penny candy and stuff. Well, the spring of when my birthday's in the summer, so the spring before my 10th birthday, the phone started ringing like crazy while I was at school every day. I'd come back home, my mom would say, 3 ladies called today and they want you to mow their lawn. Suddenly, it got to be end of April, and I had like 40 lawns lined up. I'm going into a panic. So I go to my dad, and I say, he says, you're going to have to start a business. Well, I didn't know what a business meant exactly. Anyway, long story short, went through the whole summer, hired a couple of my buddies from Little League. We hauled our lawnmowers all over up Arlington, Ohio, cut lawns, ended up with, $1,500 in the bank. And I remember being absolutely amazed that something as simple as cutting a lawn could produce $1,500 in the bank. The reason this relates to my adult life is that I stored away all these positive thoughts about being a childhood entrepreneur through some pretty difficult times I had in part of my corporate career. I had a couple of really lousy bosses, and it was just one of those things where, boy, how can I get out of here? What sustained me was thinking back to this really warm, positive feeling I had about being a childhood entrepreneur. And it really motivated me at age 40 to become an adult entrepreneur.
That's an amazing story, and it's such a shame that you couldn't do that today. Like, if a 10-year-old showed up to try and mow people's lawns, everyone would freak out.
Well, yeah. They'd say, how come your mother's not watching you? Or, as a matter of fact, there was a story not long ago of a mother who was picked up by the police because she let her 2 kids go to the park and play baseball by themselves. And I thought, what? Well, I don't want to get into that whole thing because people say you're just an old fuddy-duddy, you don't understand the generational change that's gone on in America. I do understand. I understand this. But I was saying to my wife the other day, you can drive through my neighborhood in suburban Chicago on a bright, sunny day in the summer, you'll see almost no kids outside. I don't know where they are. They're someplace. I guess they're at soccer practice or something, but you just won't see them. And I was really happy to see in my neighborhood newsletter last year at the suggestion of a couple of us, they started a little column in there on neighborhood entrepreneurs. Need your lawn mowed, need your snow plowed or whatever. Here's some people that can do it. We didn't even have that until 2 years ago. Now, all of a sudden, the word's gotten around and there are more kids who want to be in this column that can fit in the newsletter.
That's cool that that's happening, and it's good to see that shift come back. I know when I was a kid, I was a paper boy, and I would make $50 a week. When you're 12 years old, that's like $200 a week now. That's just a ton of money, and it does create a certain work ethic and the ability to learn a lot of different life skills, and it's a shame a lot of that has fallen away. The good news is for a lot of young people, though, today, they can actually, through the internet, create businesses and be able to do it from home. And a lot of times the people on the other side don't even know they're dealing with kids. So there's always a way when you have the will.
Yep, that's for sure.
So I am sure that there are a lot of people out there who are working, who may be in their 30s, 40s, 50s, who are in the corporate world and realize that this is not the dream they had for their life, but they don't know what to do. They don't know how to make a change. They don't even know where to begin. You work with a lot of people, boomers, so most of your clients are 50 plus, and they are starting businesses. What are you seeing demographically wise with this population?
Well, interestingly, from the time I started almost 30 years ago, I was always selling to people that were my peer age, which was in the 40s and it was the 50s. And it was a nice, steady business. I did other things also to make money. I'm a typical entrepreneur in that I have a number of different income streams. But around 2002, it really started to explode. we started getting over 100 email inquiries a month about various topics related to being a boomer entrepreneur. Well, I thought about why is this happening? Simple demographic. That's when the oldest boomers started turning 55 years old. And there seems to be this invisible psychological mark in life where when you get to 55, you kind of know if you're still in the corporate world, you're on borrowed time. And if you're not in the corporate world, you're still too young to stop working and you need to do something else. And that seemed to be when I would talk to these people when they were, say, 45, I would get interest but no action. Even at age 50, I get interest and no action. Now suddenly at age 55, I was getting both, interest and action. And today our typical client is about 57 years old. And really moving into entrepreneurial work is their opportunity to say, I'm not ready to hang up the spurs completely. I'm in good health. I still have energy. But what I would like to do is I'd like to have better flexibility between my leisure time and my work time. And I would like to make some money. And I will tell you that our clients are very realistic about the money thing. I rarely ever get a client who says, I want to make $200,000 the first year. They come to me and say, listen, if I can make 25 the first year and then raise it to 40 and then raise it to 50 after a couple of years, I'd be really happy doing this because I'm doing something I love, I have schedule flexibility, and I'm making a fair amount of money. I'm making $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a month. So they're pretty realistic about that, and that's been a real joy to me because when I was dealing with younger entrepreneurs, they all thought they were going to be millionaires. And they weren't going to be. They didn't have the determination to be a millionaire. I know what it takes. I've built $1 million business, fortunately, in my life, and it takes a heck of a lot of time to do it. So this is really what I'm finding happening. Around age 55, it's just it triggers these people.
So is that just human nature something, or is there something else about 55, or is there something happening in the workplace that starts to make these people feel like they are no longer wanted? Have you noticed anything that's that triggering event?
Well, it's all of the above. If it's all three things you said. It is, first of all, life events. What's happening in some cases is the last child leaves home by the time you're mid-50s. If not, they're already in college or about to get out of college. So number one, the empty nester syndrome kicks in, and people say, we don't really have the day-to-day responsibility, plus we have a 4-bedroom house, plenty of room to do something. Number two is the fact that by the time you're 55, you've been working more than 30 years. And you're getting a little burnt out. So there's a burnout factor where even if you kind of enjoyed your corporate job, you're tired of being bossed around and told what to do and not having much time. I know I was a typical corporate guy. I was a corporate marketing executive, an MBA-trained guy. And the last half of my career, last 10 years, I was probably working 60 hours a week, untypical, including travel. I had no free time. I had to drop all of my charity work. I had to stop coaching Little League. All the things I love to do outside of work, I had to give up because I was either exhausted or I wasn't in town anymore. And all of a sudden now that, at age 55, that psychologically has been wearing on you and wearing on you and wearing on you. And you're finally saying, hey, if I can pull the plug here financially, I'm going to do it. And then the third thing, of course, is this external factor, which is there's no denying that there is rampant age discrimination in the corporate job market. They do not want, on whole, I'm not going to say in every company, but on whole, they really don't want you after your mid-50s. They want you out of there, and they want to get a 35-year-old in there or a 30-year-old in there. So all three of those really are driving three mega trends, which is why there were 115,000 businesses started last year by someone over age 55. It's a major, major sociological thing in America.
That's quite interesting. I'm wondering what prevents people in their 40s, because they have the interest, but they're not taking action.
Part of the problem we have is that because almost virtually everybody who's in their 40s today, none of them will get defined benefit pensions anymore. That's pretty much true. The last group of people getting defined benefit pensions where you're guaranteed a certain amount every month for the rest of your life, the last group of those are in their 50s. If you're in your 40s, even if you work for IBM no longer has a defined benefit pension plan. They have 401k, that's it. I think the uncertainty of the 401k as your only retirement tool is really spooked a lot of people. Because I don't know about you, well, you are a financial genius because that's your business, but I'm not. If I had to figure out all by myself how to manage, $200,000 in my 401k, it would give me pause to do that. So I think what's happening to people in their 40s is they say, oh, man, this is it. All I have is the money I'm going to get off of this 401k, and if I make one investment mistake or one outside, because there are people who remembers now what happened in 2008 and 2009. There were people who were being very conscientious putting money in their 401k. They were always making the match, getting the corporate match. They were being smart about this, and all of a sudden, in a matter of a year, they lost 30% of their value. Nothing they could do about it. So I think the 40-somethings today are reflecting on what happened and are saying, oh, I don't know if I'm ready to make this jump yet. I mean, I do get clients occasionally in their late 40s, but that's a rarity.
Does this have to be a jump, or can this be something you start doing on the side? But I guess if you're working 60 hours a week, you don't have a side.
It depends on what your job title is. I was in sales and marketing. I'm sure you know sales and marketing people. You're on the road a lot, or you're making client presentations. It's the most outward face of any corporation, or the sales and marketing people. On the other hand, if you're the director of the accounting department, other than during tax preparation parts of the year, you probably have a pretty regular schedule. You clock in, you clock out. Those types of people can start something very effectively on the side. They can do a little consulting gig here or there. They can start a little e-commerce store. They can maybe develop a product. I had a guy who was an accounting manager, and he made baby cradles, wooden baby cradles, in his basement, and sold them on the side for probably 10 years before he ever stepped out and became a full-time entrepreneur. He could do that because he was leaving work every night at 5 o'clock or 5:30. Almost never booked in overtime, didn't work on weekends. Whereas sales and marketing people, it's crazy. I mean, you never know what your schedule's going to be. I mean, I remember many, many times calling my wife and saying, I won't be home for dinner. So it really depends on what your job title is. If you have that type of job that's got the regular scheduling, yeah, you can absolutely start something on the side in your 40s.
That's quite interesting. So what are the different factors that prevent people from starting? I would assume fear's got to be a big part of it. I don't know if there's other factors involved.
Well, you hit on one of the big ones, but it's not perhaps fear as you might contemplate. And that is, most people would say, oh, they're afraid of losing all their money doing it. Well, we work with a business model in our startup program where you're launching your company for under $10,000 and you're running it for a couple $100 a month. This is a whole process I've developed over the last 15 years. The risk factor from losing all your money is relatively low, but there is a bigger risk factor. This is the psychological risk factor, and that is people are afraid they just don't have a business idea that will be sustainable in the market, that will really get anybody to pay for it. And they're afraid that they've told their friends and relatives that they're going out and do this, and then a year later they're foundering. They're more afraid of being embarrassed than they are of losing all their money, which is why we spend a lot of time at the front end of our relationships with our startup clients really going over their concept. We try to use a process that comes from the software industry called minimal viable product, MVP. What do we need to do to prove that you can, at a minimum, you can make some money from what you want to do here? And we do that for a pretty affordable fee, and we do it in less than a month. So they don't have a big, huge buy-in, but they know at the end of this process, yes, I see the value in the market, and then they're much more prepared to put the several $1,000s into it to go the rest of the way. So that's one of the reasons we developed that product, was that we found that there was this fear of crashing and burning.
How many minimal viable products do most people have to go through before they get one that hits?
Well, a lot of people do it the first time, and I'll tell you why. I would say more than 60% of our startup clients, they're coming to us with a skill set they already developed in the corporate world. That's what they're going to build a business around. It's something they've been doing 15, 20, 25 years. They know this. They know the industry. They know the problems. They know the challenges. The big thing that they don't have so much confidence in, which is one of the things that we help them put on top, is they don't know how to do the selling element of it. A lot of these people were not selling people in the corporate world. They were managers of things. And, selling and marketing is in my blood. I've been doing it since I was, 12 years old, so I understand this. So we make sure that we put that element, we give them a lot of support and hand-holding in the marketing area and selling area because they don't understand that. A lot of them come to us the first time the idea works when we show them the market interest in it, we show them what kind of money they can make, and then we put the sales prospecting tools behind them. Then they succeed and they're really happy.
That sounds incredible that you're able to do that and that people are able to come up front with the idea. But I guess it's because they do have a tremendous amount of experience. And it's funny because I think a lot of times we think the experience we have is nothing special and that everyone has it. So it's kind of that self-doubt to ourselves of not believing that what we have to offer is actually highly valuable.
No, you're very right about that. That's part of the burnout process in the corporate world. I don't know that corporations do this purposely, but they like to get you into niches. For example, my last 3 years I was in the corporate world, there was one particular thing I was really good at, and that was getting back clients that we had ticked off. People that said, I'm never going to do business with them again. Somehow, I don't know how this came about, but I was really good at going back to them and figuring out what are they really angry about and what can we do to overcome this, and then get them back to the company. Well, I was so good at this that I was working for a small company in those days, $6 million company. The owner wouldn't let me do hardly anything else. There's so many other things I wanted to do, and every time I would go to him and say, "Can I do this? Can I do that?" He'd say, "No." He'd kind of persuade me to go back and stay in the niche because the niche was really profitable for him. That's what corporations do. They want you to do things that are profitable for them, not for you necessarily. As a result, you can start all these other skills you've had earlier in your career, you kind of put them off to the side because that's not the niche you're in right now and the niche that the corporation wants you to keep after. So one of the things we say to people is, tell me something you got recognition for in your corporate career. Just go home and write these things down. And what we find is once this mental dam starts to break, they think of things that they got 15 years ago that they hadn't talked about since then, that they were proud of. I got Rookie of the Year, a salesman in my industry, or I was one of the top 15 accounting directors in my industry. I forgot about all of this. And the reason for that is the corporations really don't, it's not a great value to them that you win an award. And they don't really ballyhoo it very much. Maybe if you're Employee of the Year or something, they'll put your picture in the front lobby. But other than that, it's, on to the next thing. Well, you got all this stuff in your life that could be valuable. So we help them try to dig that out sometimes. And all of a sudden, this light goes on. They say, yeah, I am accomplished. I say, darn tootin' you are.
Are there certain principles that you can look at that says, you know what, this is probably a good idea, or right off the bat, you know what, these are bad ideas, and maybe there's some principles behind what makes a good business idea versus a bad idea?
Good question. It's a really essential question of this whole process. Almost any idea that's based on something you know how to do really well and are good at, almost anything that's related to that can be successful. The question is, what scale can it get to? There are businesses where people come to me, and I know they can make some money, but I know they're going to probably get to $50,000 in total sales, and it's never going to get any bigger than that. And I'll give you an example. I've had people come to me who want to be a life coach or a business coach. Very commendable. I have a lot of friends that do this, but I will tell you that I've observed time and time again that when you get to around $50,000 or $60,000 a year, you start to burn out. So if you come to me and say, I want to get $300,000 for my coaching business, I'll probably discourage you because I just know from experience that's not the kind of business. Now, on the other hand, if you come to me and say, I have a product I can sell for $129, and we need to figure out a way to sell it online so people can buy it 24/7, then absolutely you can turn that into a $300,000 a year business because there's no labor constraint on it. You're putting a tiny amount of labor in for a very large outcome. So that's the only reason I would really discourage people. Now, there is one other thing, and that is occasionally I get people come to me and I say, what's the genesis of your idea? And they'll say, well, my brother-in-law told me you can make a lot of money at it. I will definitely discourage those people. Matter of fact, we won't take them on as clients because they have no personal buy-in to the concept. They just think it's a moneymaker. They'd be better to go out and buy a house and try to flip it.
That works. I do that all the time. We just bought another one.
There you go. They'd be better to do that. It's more what they want is more of an investment strategy than an entrepreneurial strategy. And I don't discourage them from doing the other thing. It's just that I don't think they're going to do very well in the entrepreneurial strategy. So I say, hey, try something else here. And
I'm guessing that's because the entrepreneurial strategy takes work. It takes a bit of grit. It takes being able to push through the difficult times. And if you don't love what you're doing, you're going to give up. Is that it, or is there something else?
No, that's it. As I say, you start a company for love and for money. You need the love until the money comes. And these people don't have the love. At least not in that. They may have a great deal of love in flipping, and they can be very successful. I don't mean to pick on flipping. It's just something that came to my mind quickly here. But, what people really want in some cases, they want an investment strategy. And I say, well, why don't you go take a day trading course instead? Figure out how to trade stocks. That might be something more that you'd like to do. But, yeah, in my case, I didn't really start making big money for 2.5 years after I started. I made some money, but not big money. And it took my first big breakthrough. It took me 2.5 years, and then I got on a track where I made $350,000 in the next 7 years. But the first 2.5, and I quit a $90,000 job. I'll never forget going to visit my dad in Phoenix a few months before I was going to leave and start my first company. And my dad was from the Depression era, and you know how that is. Your parents probably were too. You always had a job. That was my dad's mentality. So I'm trying to tell him while I'm there that I'm leaving this perfectly good job. And anyway, finally I get the courage up the last day to tell him. We're sitting in his backyard in Phoenix, and he says to me, I said, I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to start so-and-so. So I explained the company to him, and there's this long pause. And with parents, you never know what the long pause means, particularly with your dad. He could be ready to blow up. So in my case, my dad just very calmly looked at me and said, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but with 4 children, I didn't think I could do it. He had never divulged this to me before. And my dad became my biggest fan in being an entrepreneur until he passed away at age 85.
And so there's a life lesson there. When you share your ideas and you tell the world what you want to do, you'd be shocked at what comes back sometimes. And here it is, right with your very own dad. You share what you think is going to be not the greatest outcome in his world, and it turns around. It's just amazing how that happens in life.
Well, you're right. I mean, some people say it's part of this law of attraction, and I don't want to get into an area where people say this is some kind of black magic or something, but really the more positive energy you put out in the world, the more of it comes back to you. And sometimes what will happen is if you put out your need to the world, somebody else's need will come back to you before the solution to your need will be. And if you do something on another person's need, all of a sudden your need's being satisfied. I know this happened to me last year. I was thinking, boy, I'd really like to get to know a certain person. And I put the intention out there. And then before anything could happen on it, I found out there was a local family that had a house fire, and they were really in financial trouble and they needed some help. So I belonged to a men's charity organization. So I went to them, I said, listen, can we give these people $500 to help? And so I shepherded that through. We got them the money. Well, not 2 weeks after we gave them the check, I get the opportunity to meet this person that I wanted to. Now, are they related to each other? I choose to think they are. It's a karmic exchange of some kind.
And that happens. And sometimes it's more direct, where you would be surprised at where connections happen. And I've talked a little bit about social capital in the past. And it's literally that thing. It's when you help other people, you would be surprised where the return and help comes from. In this case, it wasn't direct, but it could be that family actually knew that person. And that wasn't the case, but that happens so often. People forget that people know all kinds of people at all different levels. And I think, the 6 degrees of separation, and now probably even less now that we've got Facebook connecting us all together. And when you help people and you tell them what you want, these things do happen and they connect back. So I truly believe that it does happen that way.
No, I think you're absolutely right on that.
Getting back to the business, I have heard that in general, it usually takes about 3 years for a business to become successful. And I think what happens is a lot of people either don't have the money, or they don't keep going, or maybe they don't make the appropriate changes and learn along that 3-year curve. And it sounds like you had about a 2.5-year curve till it kicked up. Is that what you generally see, or is that not the case?
Well, it depends on your financial perspective at the front end. In my case, I really believed and was ultimately successful in creating a very successful company that made a lot of money. That's not necessarily the objective of a lot of our startup clients. They come to us and say, if I can make $20,000 in the next year, do work that I like and be proud of it, I'll be perfectly satisfied. And for those kind of people, it doesn't take 3 years. If you want to be, if you come to me and say, listen, this is going to be a major part of my retirement play. I want to build something that I can sell in 5 years for a couple $100,000, then yeah, absolutely. That's going to take longer to do that. One of the reasons it takes longer is not so much that you're not making some money pretty quickly in your business. What the challenge is when you really want to grow your company is what's called scaling. How do you scale it? How do you take a lead stream that's giving you 5 prospects a month and make it 50 prospects a month? That can take a year or more to go from 5 prospects a month to 50. And that's how you scale business, is you have to have more people coming in at the front end in order to have more people you sell to. But if you come to me and say, listen, I don't want this to be a hobby business, but I don't care if it never gets to be $60,000 a year, then you'll probably start seeing success based on your parameter much sooner than 3 years. But in my case, I had a more ambitious objective to my business, and it took me almost 3 years to really get on track to do that.
How often do you see people kind of get stuck back on that hamster wheel in the sense of, you know what, I just want this to be a nice retirement business. I just want to make $20,000 a year. And then they start to do that, and all of a sudden they start looking around and going, well, now I want to make 40 just because it's, that kind of inner struggle of wanting more. Or do you see people truly be at peace and say, you know what, this is what I started, this is what I'm doing, and I'm content?
I see both.
Okay.
And I can't tell you exactly the proportion. I'll tell you one of the big things that causes a lot of uncertainty, and this is one of the reasons that we stay in touch with our clients for an extended period of time. I mean, I still talk to clients that launched 10 years ago. I mean, I talk to them every month, but I talk to them at least once a year. And one of the reasons that they will come back to me 2 or 3 years after launch is they'll say, I've been offered a partnering opportunity, like a co-marketing, where somebody's come to me and said, I want to market with you for this objective. And I just don't know if I want to do this. I have probably 10 or 15 of these conversations a year with past clients. And it's a positive thing. I mean, somebody's offering you an opportunity to make more money, but typically the reason that they are feeling stressed about this is that they pretty much concluded they'd have to triple their amount of time they're putting in every month in order to pursue this partnership. And sometimes I say to them, I don't think this really fits in with the life plan you told me about several years ago. So I do have people who come to me and say, I could be bigger than I am, I could be more ambitious, I don't think I want to do that. And I say, that's your choice. Because look, when you're in the corporate world, you have choice over almost nothing. You can't pick your boss, you can't pick your time frame, you can't even pick what city you live in a lot of cases. If they transfer you, you either go or you lose your economic viability. Now all of a sudden you're in this entrepreneurial zone and you've got choices, and you need to exercise choices, or you are not getting the benefit of being in the entrepreneurial zone.
And so you said something interesting. You talked about a life plan. Is this something that people come to you with, or is this something you sit down and help them develop?
They can describe aspects of it, but we help them codify it a bit. I'm not a career counselor or a life coach. Sometimes I will refer people who come to me to a life coach first. I have several friends that are life coaches, and they'll maybe work with this person for a while, and then they'll come back to us and get on the entrepreneurial track. But sometimes they just come to us and say, listen, I say to them, what do you want to be doing over the next 2 years? Tell me what your life is like. We do that with virtually every one of our clients. And we ask them, where do you want to be? We have a little exercise. We send them by email. They fill it out. They send it back to us. My coaches and I can look at it and say, okay, we understand. And then we'll book a call with them, and we'll say, okay, let me make sure we're clear with you. You're saying you want to be able to do this, you want to do this, you want to do this. For example, we had a client come to us last year. He said, we just found out my daughter's pregnant with her first child. Well, right off the bat, that's a 9-month time frame that's going to be overshadowing whatever he does in his business. And I said, okay, we got to be careful to make sure we're not overcommitting you time-wise in the next 9 months. because at the end of that, there's going to be a little baby coming, and you're going to want to be there for that. I am, they'll say. So they don't have a written plan usually when they come. Boomers are notoriously bad at writing down things that they want to do in life. They're bad at doing retirement plans. They're bad at doing life plans. Or just they don't write it down. But we help them kind of get it in writing. We say, okay, here's what we're going to do. Now, obviously, we ourselves cannot deliver everything this person wants. For example, if the guy says, I want to cut 15 strokes off my golf score, I can't do much about that. I'm not very good at golf myself. Okay. But if he says to me, I want to be able to have time to go on 2 overseas golf trips a year, I can do something about that.
Okay. I ask that because I find that most people don't have a life plan and are not intentional, and then they get stuck on a track that they may not enjoy. And so I always encourage people to be intentional and figure out your plans so you know where you're going. And once you have a target, it is so much easier to hit it.
Well, you're absolutely right. There's an old saying, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. And you may not want to be on a certain road. So, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I got to be honest, though. Probably 25 years ago when I was early in my business, I probably wasn't committing to a life plan and writing every year either, because I was humping it so much trying to get the business to go. So I don't want to sound hypocritical here and say, shake my finger at these people and say, you really should have a written plan. Well, I didn't always have a written plan either, but sometimes what you don't do becomes a great lesson to tell other people what they should do later, because you learned. So you're absolutely right. I mean, I think people should at least be able to focus on 2 or 3 things they really want in their life in the next 2 to 3 years. From the point after they meet us, what do you want to do here? And in some cases, we'll have people come back to me after they get launched, and they'll say, really, decided that we really want to spend 6 months a year in the Caribbean. And I'll say, well, it doesn't really fit in with your business model. Your business model is personal delivery of service to someone in, suburban St. Louis. This really doesn't fit. Unless we change your business model, you're probably going to have to abandon the business. But that's a really rare case. We occasionally have those people come to us. We have to say that really doesn't fit your business model. Most people come to us and say, I want to make this life change, and we say, fine. Just realize that change may reduce your income from the business. They say, fine, we understand that. And then everything's copacetic.
Have you found a lot of people who've kind of gone the route of, I'm going to go sit on the beach or play golf all day, and find out a year or 2 into it that they're no longer thrilled?
Yes, but not as many as you might think. And I'll tell you why. There's a certain level of determination that we don't find with those people. It's not that they're lazy at all. I mean, they've worked really hard and they deserve to have time off, but that's fairly rare. I'd say probably fewer than 15% of our clients over the last 5 years have been in that situation. What we do find are people who are asked to leave the corporate world, think that that's all they're not going to really do anything more, and then a year later they decide they want to do something again. They really haven't gone off, laid on the beach and played golf. They've stayed kind of where they were, and all of a sudden now they've decided they really want to do something else. But the people who've been full-on retirement for a couple of years, we don't see them so often come back and start businesses because it takes too much work. They're in this whole leisure time mentality now, where you have cocktails every day and you go to dinner at 6 o'clock in the evening. And we don't see that as often as we do with people who've left the corporate world and said, I'm not going to work, and then they come back and want to work.
There's got to be a lot of fear and issues around walking away from a 6-figure corporate job. I mean, in some senses, if you're let go, it makes the decision easy. But if you want to leap on your own, that's probably a little bit more difficult.
Oh, it sure is. Yep, it is. I would say 40% of our clients, not so much now, but over the last 7 or 8 years, certainly during the recession, probably about 40% of our clients have been pushed out. And, for example, I had a really talented guy who was a health and safety consultant for really large manufacturing companies. And at 52, they called him. He was the head of a department in a $16 billion company. And they came in and said, you're all gone. We don't want you anymore. Don't need you anymore. And, he didn't expect this to happen. He thought the next day he was going to still be doing this. But he woke up and said, something? In my role as a corporate manager, I bought consulting services from people all the time. I know what kind of money they made. I know what we expected them to do. I can do this. And in fact, he eventually turned it into a successful $200,000 a year business, which he just retired from after 9 years. He just closed his business a couple of months ago. But yeah, in his case, you're right. He was forced out, and I met him at an outplacement company because I used to do a lot of work there. And he said, "Hey, I don't think I want to go back." So yeah, it is scary. I'll tell you the ones that are not in that zone, and that's people who've worked for the same company for 25 years or more. Because the way the pension situations work in most companies, once you get to 30 years, you really don't get much financial incentive to stay on. My wife retired from our court system here in suburban Chicago, and after 30 years, she got almost no additional pension benefit from staying there. So she just, she walked away after 30 years. And that happens in the corporate world, too. If you've been fortunate enough to work for the same company for 25 or 28 years, you probably are getting close to the max you're ever going to get, so you're more inclined to walk. If you don't have that, then it is a lot more act of faith to do it.
It's very rare for me to meet people who have pensions today unless they are in some type of a government job. Most of the people, I'm 52, most of the people my age or younger, they don't understand. The only pension they know of is a cash balance pension, which is basically, your 401k. It's not really, it's not a pension at all.
No, it's an investment plan. Not even an investment plan. I don't know exactly what it is. No, you're right. I mean, as I said, nobody in their 40s gets a pension unless they work for the government, and even there, they're trying to figure out ways to get around this. I was just reading the other day that the Texas state legislature is trying to figure a way to change their pension system in the state, and get away from this. But we're very fortunate. My wife's in the same pension fund as the mayor of the city of Chicago, so I don't think it's going to change anytime soon.
Chicago may not change; they may go bankrupt, but that's a whole nother conversation.
Oh yeah, that's right. Oh yeah, but they'll be doing their backroom dealing until the day the Dun & Bradstreet rating goes absolutely in the tank.
Very true. So, in order to start a business, how much money do I need to have?
Well, it really depends on the style of business, but I can show you dozens of different business models that you can do for less than $25,000 the first year, because the operating expenses are so low. When I started my first business 30 years ago, it cost me $25,000 or $30,000, plus I was paying $1,000 a month, because back then most businesses had space outside of their homes for a lot of reasons, not the least of which was you didn't look very professional if somebody found out you worked at home in those days. I remember renting the address of a building here in suburban Chicago just to look bigger, even though I was working at home. Today, that doesn't matter. Most of, if you're a coach or you're providing a service or you run an e-commerce store, nobody cares where you are. You can do it from anywhere. You can do it part of the year in Chicago and part of the year in Phoenix if you want to, as long as because it's all internet-based. So, in that case, it's pretty inexpensive. So I can say with honesty that the vast majority of business types that we work with, you're going to have less than $300 a month expense. So you don't need to have a lot of cash on the side in order to pay. Where you need the cash is to cover the personal end of this. If you have a $2,000 a month mortgage payment still, then you've got to be realistic that if the business is just bringing in enough to cover its own expenses and a little bit more, how are you going to cover the mortgage expense? Well, that may have to be money you get from, you put aside. But that all comes down to personal circumstances. We have clients that come to us and say, I paid off my house, I don't have a mortgage payment anymore, my personal expenses are just a couple $1,000s a month, and I say, well, you can do it for less than $25,000 the first year.
And so that's why it's important to not be in debt, because that limits your freedom, and to build the wealth so you can make these choices and have the freedom to live life on your terms and have that ability.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, people need to understand that building wealth in America is largely a factor of entrepreneurism. Many, many books have been written about what a typical millionaire is in the United States, but I can tell you that this has been documented. Very high percentage, more than 85% of all millionaires in the United States are self-employed. They own something. They don't work for somebody. Other than C-level managers, who get stock options and end up making $22 million a year, most people never become wealthy working in the corporate world. They just don't do it. The way you do it in America is the way you've always done it here, and as you be entrepreneurial. So, I have dozens and dozens of friends doing $200,000 and $300,000 a year from home, working in their pajamas half the time if they want to, or their sweats, and they're still making $300K a year.
That's amazing. And I guess a lot of that is probably because over the years they have built up a network and have relationships. How much does that impact your ability to create a business?
Oh, it's critically important. People ask me, what's the advantage of being a bit older when you start a business? And I have got a list of 10 or 12 of them, but the number one that I have is that we're very well networked in our 50s and 60s. We know a lot of people. This just happened to me today. I've been having problems. I run 3 companies right now, and each one of them has a website. And one of them, for some reason, I keep getting malware attacks on the site. And I'm not a real techie, so I just barely understand what's happening here. All I know is that suddenly the site doesn't work right. And I'm just really getting bugged. And finally I thought, I remember my friend John back in Virginia, who was also an entrepreneur. He had this problem. I called him up. In 15 minutes, he gave me the name of somebody. I called the person. They had it fixed the same day. I wouldn't know who that was. I could have spent days trying to find this person. But I have this extensive network. I have more than 3,000 people in my first level LinkedIn. These people I can go to. So networking is really, really critical to be able to do this, not only for the technical side, but also to build it. I get a lot of my growth from referrals. People come to me and say, hey, I've got my cousin or my neighbors talking about being an entrepreneur. He's 57. Let me hook you up with him. That's really a critical part of growing my company. Well, a lot of these people, I stimulate them to think about these referrals through my connection to them. They're in my social network somehow. And they see that I just sent out a newsletter a couple weeks ago, and all of a sudden they say, oh, I forgot to call Jeff and tell him about Fred. So it's important to have that network. It's really critical. This is the big difference between, say, a 25-year-old entrepreneur and a 55-year-old entrepreneur, is the networking power.
That's very true. And you also brought up another part, which is the technical side. And I think a lot of people might be scared off by that, but I guess there's options. Either you hire people and pay them, or you learn how to do the technical side. And today it's easier than ever to create websites and to create a presence and get things rolling.
Oh, absolutely. And I went from a position 16 years ago where I barely knew what the internet was to being fairly savvy in internet marketing. I understand search engine optimization. I understand the pay-per-click advertising. And how do I learn this? Because there's FAQs and training sites all over the web for free. Matter of fact, last year, the year before, LinkedIn, the big professional networking site, they made a very important acquisition. They bought a company called lynda.com, which is just thousands of online business training courses. And they knew this is where their clientele needs to go next. For $29 or even for free, I can get a course on how to do search engine optimization, and then I at least know enough to go out and hire somebody to help me do it. I wouldn't have even known how to qualify that person before I took this course.
And so I think that's an important point. You, as an entrepreneur, the key is to learn how to do something, but not to do it. To figure it out, understand the systems, understand what you need and how it works, and then let somebody else do the work and pay them to do it, because you can't do everything. Do you find that sometimes when people start their own business, they try to do it all and get overwhelmed?
Yes, that's what happened to me. Some people call it the Lone Ranger syndrome. Although Lone Ranger had a sidekick, we forget that. But this is kind of in the business press, they've called this the Lone Ranger syndrome. I had this real bad my first couple of years, which is probably one of the reasons why it took me 3 years to really break out, because I thought I could do everything. And this is odd that I would think this, because when I was in the corporate world, I had all kinds of support. I had an accounting department, and I had an advertising department, I had a public relations department, I had all these different people supporting me. And I don't know why I got it in my head I had to do all this stuff myself. But when I started to partner and I started to open up and let people help me, my business really started to grow. I'll tell you where this really comes. I'll just tell you a very quick example here. When I had my first website done in 1999, I paid $12,000 to have the site designed because I needed a shopping cart. And in those days, you couldn't get a service that would give you a shopping cart. Today, you can get them for $19 a month. Well, I did not know what I didn't know back then, and I paid the $12,000. Well, somebody came to me today and said, I want to redo your website for $12,000. I know all kinds of critical questions they asked them. First of all, I never pay $12,000 because I know you can get it done for less than $1,000. I know where to get it done for less than $1,000. Okay, that's part of what that exponential curve has done for me, is that I know when somebody is talking out of the top of their hat when they want to charge me something. I can say, no, wait a minute, I don't think so. And I didn't know that. I've paid many a financial lesson over the last 15 years to learn this. But that's why I'm such a good business startup coach, is that when you come to me, you get the accumulated experience of Jeff Williams having made a lot of mistakes.
And that's always good, learning from other mistakes. I've made tons of mistakes. I try to share them on different shows and episodes of all the things that I've screwed up so that someone else doesn't have to make that same mistake and learn the hard way.
You're absolutely right.
What are some of the things that people do that they waste time on that bring little or no value to the business, but seem important?
The human nature is to want to go to the things you can do quickly. People waste a lot of time on the look of their website. They'll waste a lot of time on trying to get their office organized just perfectly. They'll waste a lot of time on trying to get all kinds of paperwork management systems down. They'll just waste a lot of time on that. And none of that really relates directly to a very simple equation. If you don't get more customers, you don't grow. It's that simple. I mean, you can resell a typical customer, but in my case, I largely sell people something at the front end, and I don't usually sell them anything again for maybe 6-7 months at a minimum. So it's not like I have something that I'm charging somebody for every month. So if I want to grow, I have to have more customers. And I learned a long time ago, I mean, this took really hard lessons. I got some outside money when I started my .com company. I got $100,000 of outside investment when I started BizStarters.com back in 1999. And I'll be the first to tell you, I blew through a lot of that money. Not for personal purposes, but I just did stuff I didn't need to do. If I had focused and said, okay, I'm going to spend every nickel of this getting new customers, selling new customers, and delivering to new customers, I would have had a much larger company back in the early 2000s instead of being, getting to, or the early years, I would have had a much bigger company than I did. So, I had to learn that mistake.
And along those lines comes with a skill that I don't think is really taught very much at all, but it's one that applies to all parts of our lives and the things that we want, and that is learning to sell. Because whether you want a date, a promotion, a business, or anything else, you've got to learn the skills of sales.
Well, you do. And people start getting very anxious when you talk about that. But what I do is I say, okay, selling at its most fundamental level is listening well enough to another human being to figure out what it is that's making them uncomfortable, and then figuring out how you can make them comfortable. Sometimes you just have to walk away. If somebody comes to me and says, Jeff, my big need is I have chronic depression. I don't know how to solve that. I'm going to say you really need to see a professional. But sales comes down to listening, understanding the need, and then figuring out how you can solve it. People think that sales is all pushing hard. Don't take no for an answer, and that's the way they used to teach sales. I mean, that's how I was taught early in my career. I started as a salesman right out of college, 1970, and the corporation I worked for, it was take no prisoners selling, and I found out I didn't like that kind of selling. Today they talk about relationship selling, and as a matter of fact, there was a book written about 15 years ago called "Getting Business to Come to You," and the whole the whole pretense of this book is that you shouldn't have to sell at all. If your marketing is good enough, then people will come to you who are already very interested, and then you just have to explain what particular part of your service solves their problem, and now you got a customer. You're not really selling. You're just explaining. You're edifying. You're educating. You're not selling. And if you tell people, I don't really want you to be a great salesperson, what I want you to be is a great education person, then all of a sudden that's in their wheelhouse and they can feel a lot more comfortable.
And that's absolutely true, because when you push people to buy something, it usually does not create a good lasting relationship, and everybody ends up upset in the future. But when people have problems and you help them to solve their problems and you show them an easy way to do that, people are more than happy to give you money to help them have what they want. It's the way we do things. And every day people are constantly handing over money for a whole host of things, whether it be a cup of coffee, groceries, a meal, a new house or car. We're constantly doing this. And the other half of that is that we are constantly being sold to. So be careful that it's something that you truly need and not something that you got excited and hyped over in the moment.
Boy, isn't that true? You really got to have that patience and discipline. Yeah, you're right. I mean, I'm not really the world's greatest salesperson myself from a traditional point of view, but I'm very successful at what I do because I have my own form of selling here. For example, if somebody comes to me and we have a conversation on the phone and it sounds like they really are motivated and highly ready to be entrepreneurial, I will probably follow up with them a couple times over the next 4 or 5 weeks. But then usually after that, I'll just say to them, listen, it seems to me like there's something else happening in your life right now that's discouraging you from moving forward. I'm just going to stop communicating. Come back to me when you're ready. And traditional salespeople would never do that. They would keep driving and driving. They send 10, 12, 15 messages to this guy. I don't do that. I send you 2 or 3 messages. I try to understand what you want. I try to explain how I'm going to help you. If you're not moving off the dime, then I just say, please be honest with me. And, for example, I had a prospect come back to me a while back here, and he said, I got a family health problem that's developed. I absolutely understand it. That's what happens when you're in your 50s. Suddenly your parents are in their 80s and they're having trouble, and they need your help. I said, come back to me when you're ready. Half of them maybe come back to me sometime. But you just have to have the confidence. You did a good job of initially understanding their problem and a good job of telling them how you'd help them, and then it's all in the balls in their court then. And so that's really not selling. I mean, I'm not besieging people to buy from me because I never could live with that. And the point is, I don't have to have that many sales to have a really good life. I can sell 50 clients a year and have a really good life.
And so it is a numbers game, and you need to figure out the numbers for your business and what's required and how it all comes together. And again, that's being intentional up front. And knowing that. When you probably get a lot of people come to you, how many of them are of the caliber that you say to yourself, they're willing to do the work and will follow through?
Probably 1 out of 6.
Okay.
They're all well-intentioned. I mean, I don't get people who come to me in just what I call blue skyers, where they have no sense of reality at all. I rarely get that because I think that wears off. By the time you're in your 50s, you got a pretty realistic view of life. But I'd say the people that I know that we can help to move forward, 1 out of 6.
And what differentiates the 1 out of 6?
Number one, they'll agree to be coached. Men in particular have a problem with that sometimes, I have to say. I'm sometimes a little embarrassed to look around to my fellow gender and say, boy, you guys are boneheaded sometimes. So they have to be willing to be coached. Number two, if we lead them to water, in other words, we show them why they should be confident, we show them how there's a need in the marketplace, we show them who they can sell to, we show them how much money they can make. If we show them all of that, then they got to be prepared to say, okay, I'll take the next 7 steps with your help. So that's number two, is you take them to you lead them to the water, they got to be willing to drink. And I'd say the number 3 thing is that they've been realistic in the whole financial aspect before they go in. If they say, I only want to work 15 hours a week, then I say, well, in most cases, you're going to be lucky to produce $30,000 in a year. Is that all right with you? And if they say yes, then that's the third thing we look for is financial reality. Just give you a quick example of the opposite situation. We have a really large telecommunications company headquartered here in Chicago, and they've been laying off engineers for years and years and years. And the first time I tried to deal with some of these engineers 15 years ago, I'd say to them, well, what would you like to do financially in the next year? Oh, I want to make $125,000 on my own. I'd say, not going to happen. Well, I'm not interested. They hang up. So those kind of people we try to weed out. I don't get those too much anymore because those people have all gone and done something else. So I get the opposite, where people come and say, I just want to do 20, 30,000 and have some time off during the year and enjoy what I'm doing. I say, fine, you're on our track.
And if you've set up your financial life correctly, then you have the ability to do what you love. And I'm assuming most of the people you work with truly do what they love and are happy and enjoying life at that point.
Oh, yes. Matter of fact, many of them rediscover the joy of working because they haven't had it in the corporate world. I mean, I hate to tell you this, but a very, very large percentage of 55-year-old corporate managers are not happy. They're not happy in their day-to-day life. They don't like the way they've been forced to equivocate on personal values. They don't like a lot of things about the corporate world. Well, now you offer them an opportunity to do things that are meaningful for them, that fit into their spiritual set of values. And yes, they're going to give up some financial some financial wherewithal to do this. They're willing to make that trade-off because they get to be true to themselves. And my wife told me a long, long time ago. She said, Jeff, you had to be self-employed. It was foretold for you in the stars. And I don't know if that's quite true, but I know that my whole 18 years as a corporate manager, I was always edgy and a little uncomfortable about the thing. And there were times when I was very uncomfortable about the thing, and I thought about being a 10-year-old entrepreneur. But my wife said to me, this is something you are so naturally suited for, you had to do this. And I am so thankful to the good Lord that I have her there because she has been my greatest supporter all these years.
And I'm going to say, I don't think you have to wait till you're 55 to hate the corporate grind. I'm betting there's a lot of people in their 30s and 40s who are already sick of it. They're just not willing to make the change, I guess, at this point.
Right, absolutely. I mean, I think the millennials are starting to exhibit some sense of the fact that you can't get everything you want from one employer relationship. You're going to have multiple ones in your career. I mean, I don't know anybody really told me in college back in the 60s that I was going to have one employer for life. I don't know anybody really told me that. But it was kind of insinuated when you got out there. And now in my case, I had 6 employers in 18 years, which is kind of unusual. But today it's not unusual at all. They're predicting that you'll have 10 to 12 employers if you graduate from college today. You'll have 10 to 12 employers before you leave the corporate world. Very different mindset.
It is, and you need to keep up and change and build your skill sets and learn to build your network and create the wealth so that you have the foundation to be able to do what you want to do. Because when you have all of that, then you get to live life on your terms, which makes it much, much happier.
Absolutely.
Is there anything that we haven't talked about today that we should touch base on?
I would just like to send a really strong note of encouragement to your listeners. If they're in a situation where, for whatever reason, they're going to be out of the corporate world soon, or they're already out of the corporate world, but they still feel they have a lot of potential to help people and to have a happy life, contact us, because there is so many different ways to do business today. You can write an ebook and sell it. You can do a webinar. You can do live workshops. You can sell a service. You can do consulting. There are at least 15 different commonly used ways to start a business today, and there is one to fit every one of your listeners. You don't have to be thinking, oh my God, I've never thought of myself as an entrepreneur. Don't even use that word. I mean, I know I use it in my advertising only because it's a quick way to explain, but I just want to encourage people. Too many people say, oh, I could never do that. Yes, you could. I have had some of the most unlikely people be happy as business owners. When they came to me, if you'd met them, you probably thought, no, that person will never do well. And they have done really well. I have a guy who was an accounting manager, extremely introverted, did not like to talk to people other than people he had to talk to. And he went into a business where he could do that, and he is really, really happy.
You have to know who you are and build your business around your skill sets and your behaviors.
Basically, you have to be committed to the concept that you still have some years of productive work, and that you have to know that almost every skill that somebody has, there's somebody who wants to buy it. You'd lose sight of that fact when you're in the corporate world because they're only paying you for a certain set of skills. You start forgetting about the fact you have other things that people will buy from you. I mean, we've had people start business successfully based on a personal interest that they've had casually for 15 years. And all of a sudden now it became serious and they did it every day. Well, they probably wouldn't have had that on the radar a few years ago until they came to us and we said, hey, what else do you do? What do you do outside of work that you enjoy? Well, I do this, I do that. Don't think it has to just be a business that generates from your business skill. It can be something from a life interest. We probably work with 4 or 5 people a year where we turn hobbies into businesses.
And that's really fun because then you're getting paid to do what you love to do. And it's possible.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the biggest thing is people just don't see that possibility.
So I would encourage your listeners to have a conversation with us or with somebody else because there is an opportunity for you out there and one that does not require a lot of risk either. I'm being very honest about this. I'm not one of these business opportunity guys that you hear on information radio that says you can start this business for nothing. Truly, I've done this more than 1,500 times over 30 years. It's doable. Everybody has a path if they want to do something after they leave the corporate world. It's out there.
Well, I thank you for sharing. If people would like to connect with you and learn more, what is the best way for them to do that?
Go to our website, which is www.bizstarters, bizstarters. You can learn more about our main products, see a picture of me with a little audio clip on the homepage. But most importantly, if you just want to chat, no cost, no obligation, there is an orange button in the upper right-hand corner that says Book Free Call. Click on that, you go into my online calendar, pick a day and time for half an hour that works for you, and we'll just chat. It's not a sales call, it's just to learn more about you and where you're going. And I can tell you that everybody that has one of these calls leaves the call knowing more than when they got on the call.
I always encourage people, when someone gives you an opportunity to do something and there's no cost, the only thing you lose is a little bit of time, go do it because you never know what the outcome is. And until you start trying different things and leaning in, you can leave so much on the table. And that's a shame.
Well, I absolutely agree with you. Absolutely.
I thank you for being here today, and I encourage people to check out the site, and we'll put it all in the show notes. Thanks for joining us, Jeff.
Thank you so much.
I encourage you to check out Jeff's site, www.bizstarters.com. Today's action step, have a conversation about what you want to do next in your life. I think we have the ability to find our happiness and create our own worth on our terms. We don't have to be tied to the identity of a job that we currently hold. What about you? Are you your work, or do you have more important things that you want to do with your life? What would you do if money didn't matter? Deep questions. Take the time to think about them. Is there someone you know who could benefit from what we talked about today? Please share, as it helps you to build social capital and create better relationships and start better conversations with the people you know, and they'll appreciate you for it. What's preventing you from moving forward, and who are you putting on your team to help you build the life you deserve? Taking no action creates a far worse outcome in life than trying something and failing. Can I help you achieve your goals? Just email me, and we can start with a short chat to see if we're a good fit. Thanks for listening. You can contact me at rocky@richersoul.com. I would love to hear how you're doing and how the information I've shared has helped you. Thanks for listening and have an abundant week.